Mexico doesn't just contain ancient ruins, it holds civilizations so advanced they calculated solar eclipses, while Europe was still in the Dark Ages, built cities larger than Rome, and developed a written language that modern scholars are only now beginning to fully decode. What you think you know about pre Columbian America is about to shift completely. Before this journey begins, I want to try something special. I want to see how far these videos are going and how far you are watching from. Welcome to the channel where we explore the world through real stories, hidden places, and unforgettable travel experiences. If you enjoy travel documentary videos like this, please like the video and subscribe. It truly helps this journey reach more corners of the world. Now tell me in the comments, which country are you watching from? Let's see how far this video can travel. All right, let's begin. Long before the Spanish arrived with their crosses and cannons, this land pulsed with empires that rose from jungles, deserts, and volcanic highlands. The Olmecs carved colossal stone heads weighing 20 tons without metal tools or wheels. The Maya constructed pyramid observatories aligned so precisely with celestial events that their calendar rivals our modern Gregorian system in accuracy. The Aztecs engineered a floating city on a lake that left Spanish conquistadors speechless, comparing it to Venice but grander. These weren't primitive societies stumbling through history. They were sophisticated civilizations with complex mathematics, astronomical knowledge that predicted planetary movement centuries in advance, and architectural techniques we still struggle to replicate today. Stand before Teotihuacan's Pyramid of the Sun, and you're facing a structure built around 200 AD, containing over 1.2 million cubic meters of material. No mortar binds these stones together. The entire edifice relies on precise engineering and gravitational physics. Climb its 248 steps, and reach a platform that once held a temple where priests performed rituals aligned with the summer solstice. The pyramid's base measurements correlate with the distance from Earth to the Sun when multiplied by a specific constant. Coincidence? The architects of Teotihuacan didn't think so. The city itself stretches across 20 square kilometers, making it one of the largest urban centers of the ancient world. At its peak, around 450 AD, roughly 125,000 people lived here. That's comparable to ancient Rome. The Avenue of the Dead runs perfectly aligned with the setting of the Pleiades constellation. Every structure, every plaza, every residential compound follows a precise geometric grid that suggests urban planning on a scale Europe wouldn't achieve for another 1,000 years. But here's what makes Teotihuacan truly mysterious. We don't know who built it. The city was already abandoned for centuries when the Aztecs discovered it and named it the place where the gods were created. No written. Records explain its downfall. No hieroglyphs identify its rulers. The civilization that constructed one of humanity's greatest architectural achievements simply vanished, leaving behind only questions carved in stone. Travel south to the Yucatan Peninsula and the jungle swallows you whole. Humidity hangs thick enough to taste. Howler monkeys scream from the canopy. Then the trees part and Chichen Itza emerges like a mathematical equation rendered in limestone. El Castillo, the main pyramid, contains precisely 365 steps, one for each day of the solar year. 4 stairways, each with 91 steps, plus the top platform equals 365. That's just the beginning of its astronomical sophistication. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, the afternoon sun creates a shadow pattern on the pyramid's northern staircase. As the sun descends, 7 triangles of light form along the western balustrade, creating the illusion of a serpent descending from the temple at the summit. This serpent connects with the massive stone snakehead at the base. Thousands gather twice a year to witness this phenomenon that the Maya engineered into their architecture almost 1,500 years ago. The Maya didn't just track the sun. Their astronomical observations recorded Venus cycles with an error margin of only 2 hours over 500 years. They predicted solar eclipses with terrifying accuracy. Their long count calendar spans over 5,000 years and accounts for leap years more precisely than the Julian calendar used in Europe until 1582. Inside Chichen Itza's Great Ball Court, whisper at one end and someone 166 meters away hears you clearly. Clap once and the echo returns 7 times, mimicking the sacred Quetzal bird. The Maya understood acoustic engineering at a level that baffles modern architects. The ballgame played here wasn't just sport. It was ritual, religion, and politics, compressed into a contest where the stakes were literally life and death. Yet for all their astronomical genius and architectural eerie mastery, the Maya abandoned their greatest cities around 900 AD. Theories range from drought to warfare to ecological collapse. recent LiDAR scanning reveals the truth might be even more complex. Beneath the jungle canopy, archaeologists have discovered thousands of previously unknown structures, suggesting Maya civilization was far more extensive and interconnected than anyone imagined. Move to the arid highlands surrounding Mexico City, and you encounter Tenochtitlan, though calling it an encounter feels inadequate. The Aztecs built their capital on an island in Lake Texcoco in 1325 AD. Within 2 centuries, it became the largest city in the Americas with over 200,000 inhabitants. Three raised causeways connected the island to the mainland. An aqueduct system brought fresh water from springs kilometers away. Canals crisscrossed the city like liquid streets where canoes carried goods and people. The Aztecs invented chinampas, artificial islands constructed from mud and vegetation. These floating gardens produced multiple harvests per year, feeding the massive urban population without depleting the surrounding land. Spanish conquistador Bernal Diaz del Castillo wrote that the markets of Tenochtitlan surpassed anything in Europe, with over 60,000 people buying and selling goods daily. At the city's heart rose the Templo Mayor, a massive pyramid dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, and Tlaloc, the rain god. Archaeological excavations have revealed over 200 ritual offerings buried in the pyramid's foundations, among them artifacts from across Mesoamerica, jaguar skeletons arranged in specific patterns, and evidence of sacrifices that modern sensibilities struggle to comprehend. The Aztecs believed the sun required human blood to continue its journey across the sky. Their cosmology wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. It was a desperate bargain with cosmic forces they believed demanded payment. Understanding this worldview doesn't require approval, but it demands recognition that these weren't savages performing random violence. They were operating within a complex religious framework as internally consistent as any medieval European theology. When Hernan Cortes arrived in 1519, he brought 600 men, 16 horses, and smallpox. The Aztecs had never seen horses or experienced epidemic disease. Within 2 years, Tenochtitlan lay in ruins, not from Spanish military superiority alone, but from a biological catastrophe that killed up to 90% of the indigenous population. Cortes built Mexico City directly atop Aztec ruins, using stones from Templo Mayor to construct Catholic churches. That act of architectural dominance tells you everything about how colonization works. Erase the foundation and build your own narrative on top. For centuries, that's exactly what happened. Mexico's indigenous history became footnote to Spanish conquest, reduced to exotic decoration rather than recognized as the sophisticated civilizations they actually were. But stones remember what people forget. In 1978, electrical workers digging near Mexico City's main square struck something massive 2 meters underground. It was an 8-ton circular stone carved with the image of Coyolxauhqui, the Aztec moon goddess. That accidental discovery led to excavations that uncovered Templo Mayor and forced a complete reassessment of Aztec civilization's complexity and scale. Today, that temple sits exposed in the heart of modern Mexico City, creating a surreal juxtaposition. Colonial-era cathedrals tower above pre-Columbian pyramids. Office workers eat lunch beside sacrificial altars. The past doesn't stay buried here. It erupts through the present, demanding acknowledgement. Drive northwest toward the Pacific coast, and the landscape transforms into harsh desert, punctuated by massive cacti standing like sentinels. This is where the story deepens further, where civilizations were only beginning to understand left traces in the dust. The Sonoran Desert sprawls across northwestern Mexico like a furnace testing the limits of survival. Temperatures here regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius. Rainfall barely reaches 250 millimeters annually. Yet life doesn't just persist in this hostile terrain. It thrives with a defiance that borders on absurd. The saguaro cactus stands as the desert's undisputed monarch, some specimens towering over 12 meters and weighing 10 tons. These aren't simple plants. They're vertical ecosystems. Gila woodpeckers drill nesting cavities into their flesh. Once abandoned, those holes become homes for elf owls, the smallest owl species in the world. The cactus seals each wound with scar tissue that hardens into a structure called a boot, creating dozens of tiny apartments within a single plant. A mature saguaro might host an entire community of birds, insects, and mammals across its lifespan of 200 years. But the real marvel isn't what lives on these cacti, it's how the cacti themselves survive. Their roots spread, inten horizontally rather than deep, creating a shallow net that can extend 30 meters in all directions. When rare rains arrive, this network absorbs water with shocking efficiency, allowing a single saguaro to drink up to 750 liters in one storm. The accordion pleated trunk expands to store this liquid treasure, then slowly contracts over months of drought. It's a living water tower, engineered by evolution rather than human ingenuity. Further west, the desert gives way to the Sea of Cortez, which Jacques Cousteau called the world's aquarium. That wasn't hyperbole. These waters contain over 900 fish species and a third of the world's marine mammal species. The sea acts as a biological laboratory where evolution runs experiments in isolation. The vaquita, the world's smallest porpoise, exists nowhere else on Earth. Fewer than 10 individuals remain, making it the most endangered marine mammal on the planet. Their survival hangs by a thread so thin it might already be broken. The Copper Canyon system cuts through the Sierra Madre Occidental with a scale that makes the Grand Canyon look modest. Four major canyons and dozens of smaller gorges create a labyrinth spanning 60,000 square kilometers. At its deepest point, Barranca del Cobre plunges 1,870 meters, deeper than its Arizona counterpart by over 300 meters. But few people outside Mexico know it exists. The Tarahumara people have inhabited these canyons for over 2,000 years, developing a culture so distinctly adapted to this vertical terrain that their very physiology changed. They call themselves Raramuri, which translates to those who run fast. That's not poetic exaggeration. Tarahumara runners routinely cover 300 kilometers in a single session, running for 48 hours straight through canyon trails that would destroy most trained athletes within hours. They don't wear modern running shoes. Many run in sandals called huaraches made from recycled tire rubber. Studies have shown their running economy, the oxygen required, yet a per kilometer surpasses elite marathon runners from any other population on Earth. Their secret isn't genetic enhancement or performance drugs, it's lifestyle. Tarahumara children start running these canyon trails as soon as they can walk, developing cardiovascular and muscular systems optimized for endurance rather than speed. They play a traditional game called Re Raji Pari, essentially a 50-kilometer kickball marathon through mountain terrain. What we'd consider an ultramarathon, they consider recreation. Spanish colonizers never fully subdued the Tarahumara. The canyons were too deep, too remote, too hostile to sustain military campaigns. So the Raramuri retreated into this stone fortress and maintained their traditions, while the outside world changed around them. Today, mining companies and drug cartels threaten what Spanish soldiers couldn't conquer. Copper deposits beneath these canyons are worth billions. Illegal logging operations strip forests that took centuries to establish. The Tarahumara watch their homeland being dismantled piece by piece, not by conquest but by extraction. Southwest from the canyons, the landscape flattens into the Chihuahuan Desert, the largest desert in North America. Here sits Cuatro Ciénegas, a valley that shouldn't exist according to any reasonable geological logic. Surrounded by bone-dry mountains, this basin contains over 200 pools of crystalline water, fed by underground aquifers. But the water itself isn't what makes this place extraordinary. It's what lives in the water. Cuatro Ciénegas is a biological time capsule preserving life forms virtually unchanged since the Precambrian era over 500 million years ago. The pools contain stromatolites, layered structures created by cyanobacteria that represent some of Earth's oldest living organisms. These same structures appear in fossil records from when Earth's atmosphere was still forming. Finding them alive and thriving here is like discovering living dinosaurs. Scientists study Cuatro Ciénegas as an analog for early Earth and potentially for life on Mars. The extreme conditions, high salinity, low nutrients, and isolation have created an ecosystem that operates on principles different from most terrestrial life. Species here have evolved such specific adaptations that moving them even 100 meters to a different pool often results in death. Each pool is effectively its own planet, but Mexican farmers are draining the aquifer to irrigate alfalfa fields. Water levels drop measurably each year. Some pools that existed for millions of years have gone dry within the last decade. We're erasing a biological archive that predates human existence to grow cattle feed. East toward the Gulf of Mexico, the terrain shifts to tropical wetlands where Mayan civilization reached heights that rival anything in the Old World. Palenque rises from the jungle like a fever dream made stone. Unlike the massive pyramids of Teotihuacan or the sprawling complexity of Tenochtitlan, Palenque feels intimate, almost delicate. Its structures are adorned with stucco reliefs so detailed they border on calligraphy. The Temple of Inscriptions contains the second longest Mayan text ever discovered, 617 glyphs covering the walls of an interior chamber. For decades, scholars couldn't decipher it. Then in 1952, Archaeologist Alberto Ruz-Luillier noticed something odd about the temple floor. One stone slab had holes drilled into it, holes that served no structural purpose. He lifted the slab and found stairs descending into darkness. The stairway had been deliberately filled with rubble. It took 4 years to clear. At the bottom, 25 meters below the temple summit, they found a sealed tomb. Inside lay the remains of Kinich Janapakal, who ruled Palenque for 68 years during its golden age in the 7th century. His sarcophagus lid depicted his descent into Xibalba, the Mayan underworld, surrounded by cosmic symbolism so intricate it spawned decades of pseudoscientific theories about ancient astronauts. The real story is far more fascinating than alien intervention. Pakal's tomb contained jade masks, shell ornaments, and pearls. Analysis of his bones revealed he suffered from severe osteoporosis and likely chronic pain for decades. Yet he ruled through Palenque's greatest expansion, overseeing massive construction projects while barely able to walk. The city he built was designed around astronomical observations so precise they rival modern calculations. The palace observatory aligned with the winter solstice. The Temple of the Cross complex mapped Venus's 584-day cycle. These weren't primitive people stacking rocks. They were mathematician astronomers encoding celestial mechanics into architecture. Then, like every Mayan city, Palenque collapsed. By 800 AD, the population had abandoned the site. The jungle reclaimed it so thoroughly that when Spanish explorers passed nearby, they didn't notice the massive stone complex 100 meters from their path. Palenque vanished beneath vines and trees, forgotten until the 18th century when local rumors of stone houses in the forest finally drew official attention. What caused the collapse remains hotly debated. Drought, warfare, environmental degradation from deforestation, probably all three in a cascading failure that dismantled one of history's most sophisticated civilizations within a single generation. The warning sits there in the jungle, impossible to ignore. Advanced societies don't decline gradually. They collapse catastrophically when multiple stresses compound beyond the system's ability to adapt. Northwest from Palenque's jungle tombs, the landscape transforms into something far more alien. Chiapas holds terrain so varied that driving 2 hours can take you through 4 distinct climate zones. The highlands around San Cristobal de las Casas sit at 2,100 meters, cold enough for pine forests. Drop into the valleys and you're back in subtropical heat within 30 minutes. This vertical complexity created isolated indigenous communities that maintained pre-Columbian traditions longer than almost anywhere else in Mexico. The Tzotzil and Celtal Maya here weren't conquered so much as bypassed. Spanish colonial authorities found the mountains too difficult to control and the economic returns too minimal to justify the effort. So these communities developed parallel to the colonial world rather than within it. The result is visible in places like San Juan Chamula, where the church interior looks like no other Catholic space on earth. The floor is covered in pine needles. Thousands of candles burn directly on the tiles. Worshippers kneel in family groups, chanting in tzotzil, while curanderos perform healing rituals involving eggs, live chickens, and Coca-Cola. Yes, Coca-Cola. The drink plays a central role in religious ceremonies here. The carbonation is believed to facilitate burping, which releases evil spirits from the body. This isn't some tourist gimmick. It's genuine religious syncretism, blending Catholic saints with ancient Maya cosmology in ways that would horrify Vatican theologians. Photography inside is strictly forbidden. Violators have had cameras smashed and been forcibly removed by community police who answer to traditional authorities rather than the Mexican state. This isn't Mexico pretending to be indigenous for tourist dollars. This is an indigenous society that happens to exist within Mexico's borders. The mountains of Chiapas also contain one of the continent's most spectacular geological features. Sumidero Canyon cuts through the landscape like an axe wound, its walls rising 1,000 meters straight up from the Grijalva River. The canyon formed over millions of years as the river carved through limestone, creating vertical cliffs that support ecosystems stacked like floors in a building. Spider monkeys inhabit the upper reaches, crocodiles patrol the river. Between them, dozens of microclimates support species found nowhere else. But the river itself is dying. Upstream dams have altered flow patterns so dramatically that the canyon's ecology is collapsing. Fish populations have crashed, the crocodiles are starving, and the hydroelectric plants powering this destruction generate electricity mainly for distant cities that have no idea what they're consuming. Moving north into Oaxaca, the terrain opens into valleys that became the cradle of Mesoamerican civilization. Monte Alban sits on an artificially flattened mountaintop overlooking 3 converging valleys. The Zapotec people began building here around 500 BC, eventually creating a city of 25,000 people on a site with no natural water source. Every drop had to be carried up the mountain or collected in cisterns during the rainy season. Why build a massive city in such an impractical location? The answer becomes obvious when you stand on the main plaza. You can see for 50 kilometers in every direction. Monte Albán wasn't built for convenience, it was built for control. From this vantage point, the Zapotec elite could monitor every valley, every village, every approaching army. The site's most disturbing feature is the danzantes, carved stone slabs depicting what archaeologists politely call dancers. Look closer, and you'll see these figures are dead or dying, often mutilated, sometimes with their genitals removed. These aren't dancers. They're conquered enemies, publicly displayed as warnings. Each slab is labeled with glyphs indicating the victim's name and city of origin. This was psychological warfare rendered in stone. Imagine being a village chief considering rebellion against Monte Alban. You'd make the pilgrimage to the city, climb the mountain, and find your predecessor's mutilated corpse carved into a monument for eternity. The message was unmistakable, yet Monte Alban also produced some of Mesoamerica's most sophisticated astronomy. The observatory building is aligned to track the Pleiades star, cluster with precision that suggests they understood Earth's axial precession, a 26,000-year cycle that wasn't discovered by European science until the 2nd century BC. The Zapotecs were tracking it 300 years earlier. Like Palenque, Monte Alban eventually collapsed. By 850 AD, the mountaintop was abandoned. The reasons remain unclear, but the pattern repeats across Mesoamerica. Sophisticated urban centers reaching their peak, then sudden catastrophic abandonment within decades. South of Oaxaca, the Pacific coast reveals geology that shouldn't exist this far from a plate boundary. Huatulco's bays are carved into ancient granite that's been folded and twisted by tectonic forces into impossible shapes. The rock here is older than the dinosaurs, yet it's been shattered and reassembled like broken pottery. The beaches themselves are strange. Some have golden sand, others are gray, a few are nearly black. Each color indicates different mineral composition, different source rocks, different geological stories. Walking from one bay to the next is like flipping through Earth's autobiography. Inland from Huatulco, the mountains rise into cloud forests where fog becomes the primary source of moisture. Trees here don't wait for rain. They harvest water directly from clouds using specialized leaves covered in microscopic channels. These forests generate their own weather, creating microclimates so localized that one hillside can be shrouded in mist, while the next basks in sun. But coffee plantations are replacing cloud forests at an accelerating rate. The economic pressure is simple. A hectare of intact forest generates no income. A hectare of coffee produces cash. The fact that destroying the forest alters local rainfall patterns, which eventually kills the coffee plants, doesn't enter the calculation. We're optimizing for quarterly profits while liquidating the ecological capital that makes those profits possible. Further south, Chiapas bleeds into Guatemala, and the border becomes increasingly theoretical. Indigenous communities here maintain family and trade connections that predate both nations. The international boundary is a colonial fiction imposed on people who've lived in these mountains for 3,000 years. This porosity creates strange political dynamics. The Zapatista uprising of 1994 began in these highlands, where indigenous communities declared autonomy from the Mexican state. They didn't seek independence. They sought the right to govern themselves according to traditional systems while remaining nominally part of Mexico. The Mexican government responded with military force, then negotiations, then a strategy of deliberate neglect. Today, large areas of Chiapas operate under de facto Zapatista control. They maintain their own schools, clinics, and justice systems. The Mexican state tolerates this arrangement because the alternative, full military occupation of mountainous jungle terrain against a population with 500 years of experience resisting colonial authority, would be impossibly costly. The result is a political landscape more complex than any map can show. Official Mexico exists along highways and in cities. Autonomous indigenous Mexico exists in the mountains and forests. They coexist, overlap, and occasionally clash, but neither can eliminate the other. Back on the coast, the Isthmus of Tehuantepec represents Mexico's narrowest point, just 200 kilometers separating the Pacific from the Gulf of Mexico. This geographical quirk has made the region strategically vital for centuries. The Spanish considered building a canal here. The French studied it. The Americans evaluated it before choosing Panama instead. Today, the isthmus is being transformed into an industrial corridor with new rail lines, highways, and ports designed to move goods between oceans faster than the Panama Canal. The project is displacing indigenous communities and destroying ecosystems that have survived since the last ice age. Progress apparently requires sacrifice, just never the sacrifice of those making the decisions. The wind here tells its own story. The Tehuantepec wind, called the Tehuano, funnels through the isthmus gap with such force that it can flip trucks on the highway. Wind turbines now cover the hills, their blades spinning constantly in gusts that regularly exceed 100 kilometers per hour. This is one of the windiest places on Earth, and that wind is being monetized. Energy companies frame this as green development, harvesting renewable power from an untapped resource. Indigenous communities see their ancestral lands covered in industrial infrastructure they didn't consent to. The turbines generate electricity, yes, but none of it powers local villages. It flows to cities and factories hundreds of kilometers away, leaving the people who live beneath the turbines exactly as poor as before, just with the added insult of constant mechanical noise. The eastern coast reveals yet another Mexico. Cancun didn't exist 50 years ago. It was designed by computer, a tourism project created from nothing by government planners who identified an optimal location for beach resorts. They needed white sand, calm water, proximity to Mayan ruins, and year round warm weather. The computer selected a sandbar on the Yucatan Peninsula, and Mexico built a city. This origin story explains everything about Cancun. It's a constructed reality, a hotel zone separated from the actual city where workers live by careful urban planning. Tourists arrive, experience a sanitized version of Mexico, and leave without seeing poverty, complexity, or anything that might disturb their vacation. The Yucatan Peninsula is geologically bizarre. It's a massive limestone platform with no surface rivers. Water doesn't flow over the land. It disappears underground into vast cave systems called cenotes. The Maya considered these sinkholes sacred portals to the underworld, which makes sense when you're standing at the edge of a perfectly circular pool of crystal clear water, dropping 40 meters into darkness. Beneath the jungle floor lies one of Earth's longest underwater cave systems. Divers have mapped over 300 kilometers of connected passages, all filled with fresh water floating on denser salt water below. Swimming through these caves is like exploring an alien planet. Stalactites hang from ceilings that were dry land 10,000 years ago when sea levels were lower. Now they're submerged, creating surreal underwater forests of stone. The peninsula's porosity creates strange problems. There's nowhere to put waste, no rivers to carry it away. Anything dumped on the surface eventually percolates down into the aquifer that supplies all drinking water. Hotels in Cancun produce thousands of tons of garbage and sewage daily. It all goes somewhere. That somewhere is the same groundwater system that feeds the cenotes tourists swim in 50 kilometers inland. Tulum represents the collision of Instagram culture with ancient sacred space. Mayan ruins perch on cliffs overlooking turquoise water, creating the most photographed archaeological site in Mexico. The ruins themselves are architecturally unremarkable compared to Palenque or Uxmal, but they're next to a beach, so they've become more famous than structures 10 times their size. The town behind the ruins has transformed from a sleepy village to a boutique hotel zone in less than 20 years. Tulum sells itself as eco-conscious, spiritual, a place to reconnect with nature while doing yoga on the beach. In reality, it's an ecological disaster. Hotels pump groundwater faster than rain can replenish it. Construction crews cut through jungle to build new resorts. Beach clubs blast music until 3 a.m., driving away sea turtles that used to nest here. The spiritual veneer is marketing. Tulum is Cancun with better branding and higher prices. Same extractive model, different aesthetic. Deeper into the peninsula, the Ruta Puke connects a series of Mayan, UARC cities built during the Terminal Classic period, right before the civilization collapsed. These weren't small settlements. Uxmal housed 25,000 people. The architecture displays mathematical precision that rivals anything built in medieval Europe. The governor's palace is aligned to Venus. Its facade contains 20,000 individually carved stones fitted together without mortar. The Maya collapsed not from conquest, but from ecological overshoot. They clear-cut forests for farmland and firewood. They built cities in areas with limited water. When a prolonged drought hit, the whole system failed. Cities were abandoned. Knowledge was lost. The jungle reclaimed everything. Their ruins serve as a warning we're systematically ignoring. They prove that sophisticated civilizations can collapse when they destroy the ecological system sustaining them. We're running the same experiment at global scale, just with better technology. Merida functions as the Yucatan's cultural capital, a colonial city that never fully embraced modernity. The historic center is walkable, shaded, built around plazas where people actually gather. It's a model of urban design that North American cities destroyed in favor of car dependency. The city reveals class structure through architecture. Spanish descended families live in colonial mansions. Mayan descended families live in smaller houses on the periphery. This segregation isn't enforced by law anymore, just by centuries of accumulated economic advantage. Every Sunday, Merida closes its main street to cars, creating a temporary pedestrian corridor filled with musicians, vendors, and families on bicycles. It's a glimpse of what cities could be if we designed them for people instead of vehicles. Then Monday arrives, the cars return, and the moment passes. The Gulf Coast north of Veracruz is oil country. Pemex, Mexico's state oil company, has drilled here for decades, extracting billions of barrels while creating environmental catastrophes it cleaned up. Refineries leak, pipelines rupture. Cleanup efforts are cosmetic at best. Local fishermen report catches declining every year. Shrimp populations have collapsed. Fish that do survive often taste of petroleum. But oil brings jobs, and jobs outweigh environmental concerns when you're trying to feed your family. The calculation is brutal and entirely rational. Veracruz itself is Mexico's oldest port, founded by Cortes in 1519. The historic center is Spanish colonial architecture adapted to tropical climate. Buildings have high ceilings, internal courtyards, and shuttered windows, designed to catch breeze while blocking sun. Its climate responsive design, built 500 years ago, more sophisticated than most modern construction, the port remains strategically vital. Goods flowing between Mexico City and the world pass through here, but the city's character is shaped more by music than commerce. Veracruz is the home of son jarocho, an Afro-Indigenous fusion that sounds like nothing else in Mexico. Groups of musicians occupy plazas every evening, playing harps, guitars, and jarana, while dancers stomp out rhythms on wooden platforms. This is culture that exists because people maintain it, not because tourism demands it. The musicians play for each other, and for locals, if tourists show up, fine. If not, the music continues regardless. North toward Tampico, the landscape flattens into coastal plain, where cattle ranching dominates. This was rainforest once. Now it's grass punctuated by occasional trees. The conversion happened over centuries, so gradually that no single generation noticed the cumulative loss. The Rio Grande marks the border with the United States, but calling it a border oversimplifies reality. It's a zone of exchange, conflict, and interdependence that extends 100 kilometers in both directions. People cross constantly, legally and otherwise, because economic disparity creates migration pressure that no wall can contain. The border is simultaneously porous and militarized, depending on who you are. Capital flows freely, goods flow freely. People are controlled, sorted, and sometimes killed for attempting the same crossing that trucks accomplish effortlessly. Mexico's northern tier exists in a strange liminal space, economically integrated with the United States but politically separate. Factories in Monterrey and Tijuana produce parts for American cars. Call centers in Hermosillo handle customer service for American companies. The countries are functionally merged at the commercial level while maintaining a fiction of separation at the political level. This arrangement benefits capital, which enjoys low Mexican wages and weak environmental regulations while maintaining access to American markets. It benefits consumers, who get cheaper goods. It catastrophically fails workers on both sides of the border, who compete in a race to the bottom that neither can win. Standing at the border, looking across the Rio Grande into Texas, the artificiality of the line becomes obvious. Same desert, same sky, same river. The difference is entirely political, a collective agreement that this side is Mexico and that side is America, enforced by men with guns. Mexico defies summary. It's too large, too diverse, too contradictory. Any attempt to capture its essence in a single narrative will fail by excluding more than it includes. That's the point. Mexico isn't a story, it's thousands of stories lived simultaneously by 130 million people whose experiences rarely align. What unifies this impossibly complex nation isn't government or geography. It's an ability to endure, to survive conquest, revolution, dictatorship, economic crisis, and cartel violence while maintaining cultural identity. Mexico bends but doesn't break. It absorbs, adapts, and persists. The pyramids still stand. The cenotes still swallow rivers into darkness. The wind still screams through Tehuantepec with enough force to remind us that some things remain. Beyond human control, Mexico's story isn't finished because it was never singular to begin with. It's a palimpsest, layers of civilization written over previous layers, each visible beneath the next if you know where to look. Walk through Mexico City's Zocalo, and you're standing on Aztec foundations covered by Spanish colonial stone, topped by modern infrastructure. Dig anywhere in this city, and you'll hit history within a meter. The past isn't buried here, it's compressed, packed tight beneath your feet, waiting. The Maya calculated planetary movements with precision we didn't match until the space age, then abandoned their cities and let the jungle reclaim them. The Aztecs engineered a hydraulic empire on a lake, then watched it destroyed by microbes they couldn't see. Teotihuacan built a city that rivals Rome, and we still don't know who they were. These aren't failures. They're reminders that sophistication doesn't guarantee survival. Modern Mexico inherits this pattern. It builds, collapses, rebuilds. The economy booms, then crashes. Democratic reforms pass, then corrupt officials hollow them out. Cartels rise, governments declare victory, and violence relocates rather than disappears. The cycle repeats with exhausting regularity, yet something persists beneath the chaos. Indigenous communities maintain languages that predate the Roman Empire. Musicians play son jarocho in Veracruz plazas because their grandparents played it, not because UNESCO designated it cultural heritage. Tarahumara runners still cover impossible distances through copper canyons, proving that adaptation beats technology when the terrain gets difficult enough. Mexico's true strength isn't in what it builds, it's in what it refuses to forget. The ruins aren't abandoned. They're visited, studied, argued over. Archaeologists keep excavating, finding new structures that rewrite timelines we thought we understood. The past remains active, present, demanding attention. Stand at the border looking south, and you'll see what America fears: complexity that resists simplification, poverty that capitalism can't solve, culture that won't assimilate into convenient categories. Stand at the same border looking north, and you'll see what Mexico resents: wealth built partially on Mexican labor, security purchased through Mexican instability, prosperity that depends on keeping the border exactly porous enough to exploit, but not porous enough to share. The relationship is symbiotic and parasitic simultaneously, beneficial and destructive, impossible to untangle because it was never cleanly separate to begin with. Mexican workers harvest California strawberries. American guns arm Sinaloa cartels. Mexican oil flows north. American corn flows south, subsidized to prices that bankrupt Mexican farmers. The exchange is constant, unequal, and ongoing, regardless of political rhetoric. What makes Mexico extraordinary isn't any single feature, it's the density of contradiction compressed into one nation. Ancient observatories and drug labs, cloud forests and cocaine routes, UNESCO sites and mass graves. It contains multitudes because it has to. Geography forced this complexity. History layered it deeper. The result is a country that defies the tidy narratives required by tourism boards and textbooks. The cenotes will keep swallowing water into underground cathedrals that divers are still mapping. The pyramids will keep aligning with solstices that no one remembers the original meaning of. The Tarahumara will keep running until mining companies finally displace them or until they don't. The outcome isn't predetermined. It depends on decisions made by people with power who rarely face consequences for being wrong. Mexico's fate isn't sealed by its past or its geography. It's shaped by the same forces affecting every nation: climate change, economic inequality, technological disruption, political corruption. The difference is Mexico faces these challenges while also dealing with colonial wounds that never fully healed, indigenous populations that never fully surrendered, and a northern neighbor that needs Mexico's labor while resenting Mexico's existence. The wind turbines in Tehuantepec spin regardless of who owns them or where the electricity goes. The Grijalva River carves deeper into Sumidero Canyon, whether we watch or not. The saguaros in Sonora store water using principles developed over millions of years, indifferent to our approval. Nature operates on timescales that make human concerns look brief and slightly ridiculous. That perspective matters. The civilizations that built Teotihuacan, Palenque, and Monte Alban seemed permanent to the people living in them. They had sophisticated infrastructure, complex bureaucracies, astronomical knowledge, and armies. Then they collapsed, and the jungle reclaimed them so thoroughly that later societies forgot they existed. We're not different. Our skyscrapers and highways and power grids feel permanent, but they're maintained infrastructure dependent on constant energy input and social stability. Remove either for long enough, and nature returns. The question isn't whether it happens, the question is when and how we respond. Mexico has already answered. It survives, not through military might or economic dominance, but through cultural resilience and an ability to persist through conditions that would shatter more rigid societies. The past teaches this lesson in stone and bone and pottery shards scattered through the jungle. Empires fall, civilizations collapse, but people endure if they remember how to adapt. The ruins aren't warnings of inevitable doom. They're proof that collapse isn't extinction. The Maya didn't disappear. They're still here, speaking languages older than Spanish cathedrals, maintaining traditions that survived conquest and attempted genocide. They lost their cities, but kept their identity. That's the victory available when empires fall. Mexico will outlast whatever comes next, not because it's powerful, but because it's already survived everything the world could throw at it: conquest, revolution, economic exploitation, environmental catastrophe, political corruption, cartel violence. The list is long and ongoing. Yet the country persists, not through strength, but through stubborn refusal to disappear. The stones remember, the rivers carve, the people endure. That's Mexico. Not a museum of dead civilizations, but a living demonstration that sophistication and collapse aren't opposites. They're phases in a cycle older than nations. Understanding that cycle doesn't prevent collapse, but it changes how we face what's coming.